Welcome friends to the class of B2B marketing. So today we will be continuing with our from the last lecture where we had left. So in the last lecture we had discussed about a few concepts like the buying center. So the various members involved in the buying center such as the gatekeeper, influencer, user, decider, uh, right, and then we talked about the different types of purchasing functions, like the types of purchases we make, for example whether the product is a new product or a new task we say, or it is a modified rebuy or a straight rebuy. So that is what we had done in the last lecture and we had stopped there. Today we will continue with the purchasing system that happens in organizations, how business organizations like for example Tata Motors, Tata Steel, the large companies, any company, how do they make these purchases, right. So what is a typical purchasing cycle? We will also discuss about what are the different strategic sourcing, what is strategic sourcing and how companies have adopted strategic sourcing for their benefit, and they have made immense profit out of it. And very popular names, for example being like Toyota, Honda, right. So what kind of purchasing systems are happening, right, how organizations are conducting this process, how they are adapting changes in it. So today we will be discussing it. So let us begin with first, like what is the role of purchasing in an organization. Now for example you see any large organization, any big organization, we have understood that they buy always in bulk, right, they buy in large quantities and their requirement is very high. So when the requirement is high, it not only affects the price directly or the profitability of the company, but indirectly also it has several effects. For example, it affects the flow of material, it affects the purchasing, the production process and many other things, right. So let us look at from an article from the in the purchasing and supply management, right, and it talks about the purchasing function goals. So what are the goals that organizations have when they are doing a purchasing activity? So the goals are listed down into the left side, if you can see, as you can see. So the first is uninterrupted flow of materials. So organizations understand that most of the production processes, right, there is a mass production system or a continuous production system or a batch production system. So when there is a continuous or a large flow of material is required in order to have a smooth functioning in the production, right. So uninterrupted flow of materials is one of the most important functions of purchasing. So purchasers have to ensure that there is always ample inventory with the production team, and they the work does not stop at any point of time, because as you can understand, if there is a stoppage of work, right, it can have a cascading effect. It will have a big impact, because not only one machine, if one machine stops for example, right, many other machines which are connected to that, right, they would also be remaining idle, right. The people who are working, the worker will also remain idle. So that is a lot of loss to the company, right, and the company cannot meet its deadline. So uninterrupted flow of material is one of the most important functions of the purchasing department. It has to provide an uninterrupted flow of materials, supplies and services, so that the smooth functioning happens. Okay. Second objective or goal of the purchasing function is to manage the inventory. So there was a time when companies used to say larger the inventory better the situation. Why? Because in those times we used to talk about economies of scale, right. So companies thought the more you produce, the cost of the per unit, right, unit cost will go on decreasing. So they thought it is better to produce more and more, right. But with time completely the scenario changed, and organizations started understanding that less of inventory is better, because there might be a sudden change in the market, there might be a sudden trend in the market and customers might not be willing to take the earlier products. So a design or an earlier product may become completely obsolete. So in such a situation, how to manage your inventory so that you are not at with too much inventory and neither you are at a too less inventory, so that it interrupts your flow of production, right. So that is where the purchasing department has to play a very vital role. The third important function is, goal is to improve the quality. Now, by choosing the right kind of services, you see there are lots of producers in the market. So, there are lots of suppliers in the market, and the quality of the product and service might not be same by all the suppliers supplied. So, in such a situation, what should the organization do? So, how can the organization take benefit, right? Can it improve its quality of its product by using the components from a supplier who is supplying at a very high quality? So, this is something which is the companies have to look into. Now, this is very vital because you see, for example, just imagine a situation, a company like Xerox for example, right. So, when I am saying Xerox, how many suppliers do you think Xerox might be having? Now, just a second, if you take, start thinking in your mind, there used to be a time when Xerox used to have about 10,000 suppliers, right. Now, they have reduced it drastically and they have come down to less than 1,000 suppliers globally, right. So, just imagine, so many suppliers, the quality of the material might be different, right. So, in such a situation, how do you ensure to collect the best material or the best quality raw material, right. Then is another important goal of purchasing is to constantly monitor your supplier and build a good relationship with them. Now, why is that important? This is important because suppliers not only supply you with raw materials, right, or work in components, right, but they also help the buyers in understanding the needs of the market. So, what changes are happening in the market? So, they act as a marketing intelligence system, right. So, suppliers help in the new product development processes, they help you in understanding the needs of the market. So, and they also help in if a new need is coming or a new product is in demand in the market. So, that design, in that design also suppliers can come to great help. The next point is as per the purchasing function is to achieve a lowest total cost. Now, this is something we all know because first of all, when the word purchasing comes to our mind, the first thing that comes to our mind is to buy at a lowest price or less cost, right. But here we are not talking about list price. Please remember, when you talk about B2B markets, you are not generally or only bothered about the list price, but you are bothered about the total cost that a company can incur by purchasing or using a certain kind of raw material or a certain kind of machine or certain kind of services, whatever. Now, what do I mean by saying this? What is the difference then this list price and the total cost? Now, total cost may add up everything that happens during the entire life cycle of the product. For example, let us say I am a supplier supplying to you, let us say certain kind of office supplies. Now, those office supplies are helpful in the day to day running of your organization, but suddenly because of some problem there is a supply chain issue, logistical issue, and I am unable to, or I am not delivering, I am not supplying it to you right now. So, because of this you may lose certain kind of business because of my performance as a supplier. Now, this loss is actually a loss because it has happened because of a wrong selection of a supplier like me. Okay. So, in such a situation, companies need to understand that whatever material they are using, that should help them in achieving a low cost or a lesser cost in their entire life cycle. So, if a product, let us say you are purchasing a one material, let us say material A, material B, let us say material A charges you, let us say 1000 rupees and material B charges you 1200 rupees, but this runs for 3 years and this runs for, let us say 4 years. Now, which one would you prefer? Now, if you see, maybe in one way directly also you can understand that this is preferable. More than that, this product, let us say, is asking for about, let us say, a maintenance every 6 months, and this is asking for a maintenance every 8 months. Now, this is in that way also, if you see, this is a better product than the B is a better product than A, right. Then it helps in reducing administrative cost and it helps the firm in reaching a better competitive position, right. So, the firm can take advantage of the supplier's knowledge and the entire supply chain partners, and they can achieve a better position in the market. So, these are some of the purchasing function goals that the author had set, and this is the source. If you want, you can read the entire article. Okay. Now, coming to when we talk about purchase, so one important model that comes always handy is the Kraljic's model. So, what is Kraljic's model? I need to explain when I am talking about this. So, Kraljic gave a model which talked about 4 kinds of differences, or you can say, where he divided the entire type, all types of materials, right, that companies purchase. So, all kind of purchases that company makes, right, into 4 parts, right. So, A, B, C and D. Now, what is it saying? So, he says you can divide it, like for example, some of the products might be very important from a purchasing point of view, it might have a very strong impact on the profitability of the company. And another axis, if you see, look at the x axis, there is a point that he makes is complexity of supply market or the supply risk, that is how complex is the supply market. Now, what does it comprise of? I will explain you in the next slide. So, just understand at this moment that importance on the profit and complexity of the supply market. So, these 2 points, taking these 2 points, okay, whether supplier is available, it is in a good suppliers are there or not, all these points, right. So, he has divided the different raw materials that organizations buy into 4 parts. Now, if you look at something like a product which has very low impact on the profitability and where the supply market is also not very complex. So, things are easily available, you can understand. So, he termed it as a non-critical item, right. But when the importance of the product in terms of purchasing or profitability is low, still low like this one, but the supply market is very risky, that means there is a high supply risk, the product might not be available at the right time when you want it or something. So, in such a situation it will be termed as a bottleneck item. Why? Because it can create a obstruction in your production or it can create a disturbance in the production process. So, this is called a bottleneck item. Now, the third case, if you can see, is like when the importance of the product on or purchasing is very high on the profit, it makes a big impact on the profitability of the company. On the other side, if you see the supply market risk is very low. So, there is no problem. He terms this as leveraged items, okay. And the fourth one he talks about is where the product impact on the profitability is extremely high, but the supply risk is also very high, and he tells this as a strategic items, okay. So, all these 4 kinds of items, right, he has explained very thoroughly how companies can take advantage of this model and they can group their products into different items, leverage, strategic, non-critical, bottle, and then they can take accordingly the right strategy or build a right strategy for them, right. Let us see what it happens. Now, if you look at it, for example, as he says, supply risk, when we talked about supply risk in the last slide. So, he talks about supply risk can be understood from various points of view, the availability of the supplier, the number of suppliers available in the market, the make or buy opportunities. For example, is it better to make the product in house or is it better to buy? So, that the decision has to be taken. How many substitutes for this product are available and how readily they are available in the market? What kind of risks are involved in storing or handling the products, right, or services? What is the risk with the price volatility? For example, if if it is a very highly volatile pricing is there, then the product, if you then you have to make a special strategy, build a special strategy accordingly, right. For example, you talk about hedging of the products or something. So, if there is a high price volatility, if it is for example you talk about international markets, you are supply exporting or importing, then the currency fluctuation valuation, that also makes a major impact on your supply risk. So, and probabilities of supply disruptions. Now, what is the probability of that could be a disruption in the supply chain? Now, recently you saw COVID, right? Now, COVID made everything made us realize that the world is not so, things are not so easy. So, there was a complete disruption in the supply chain, and people, companies and countries understood that they cannot anymore have a one plus China only strategy, right. So, they started no, China only strategy will not work, and they need to come out with some better one more. So, China plus one, now they are talking about China plus one. So, one more country or market where they can rely for their products in case there is some issue, right. And the second point that you had is the profit impact, where it talks about profit impact can be measured through volume purchase, how much of volume the companies are making, what amount of volume they are making, what is the percentage of the total purchase cost, right. So, if you are buying a material, let us say, so what percentage of the total cost of purchase is it, like for example, is it 20% of the total purchase cost, or 30% or 40%, whatever it is, right, or even it can be only 1%, minuscule, very less, right. And what is the impact on the product quality or business growth. So, taking these 3 points, so the profit impact can be discussed, and taking these 5, 6 points, 6, 7 points, the supply risk can be discussed, right. So, the author has given these 4 points, and he says there is a special strategy has to be evolved for each case. First of all, when you are working as a manager, let us say, or you are a student who is going to work in a as a manager tomorrow. So, you need to first cluster, these are all different clusters, right. So, this is a separate cluster, this is a separate cluster. So, they are separate clusters. So, first identify, for example, you have thousands of raw materials required for your company, right. Now, which raw material will fall into which category, right. So, you can only make 4 clusters, let us assume there are only 4 clusters that you can make. Now, let us say item number 899, I am just giving an example, you have 1 to 1000 items, 899th item will fall into which category, 892nd item will fall into which category, 953rd item will fall into which category. So, you have to cluster them first, okay, and accordingly then take your build your strategies. Now, for example, it talks about strategic items. Let us discuss about the strategic items. Now, the name itself says that something is very important or heaviness is there. It represents a considerable value to the organization in terms of a large impact on the profit and high supply risk. We saw that in that quadrant only. So, what are your examples? Engines, gearboxes for automobile manufacturers, turbines for the chemical industry, and bottling equipment for breweries, for example, the distilleries, breweries are there, no. So, for them, so this some items can be considered as strategic when it has a large impact. Example we just discussed, okay. Now, if this is the case, if your item would fall into the strategic item case, then what strategy should the company adopt, right. So, it says that in case this happens, if your product is a comes into this category, then you should either form partnership with the suppliers or think of a single sourcing strategy. Now, that is what when I said in the just few minutes back, Xerox has reduced its supplier base from some few thousands to only below 1000 right now. And this is not only true with Xerox, this is true with almost many large corporations. You talk about Toyota, talk about Honda. Now, Toyota is also a believer in single sourcing or few less sourcing, right, a few supplier strategy. They have left that they have moved or evolved from that multiple sourcing or large supplier based sourcing strategy to a few ones, right. And this has been really very helpful for these companies. It has actually helped them in reducing their cost of operation, it has helped them in bringing their cost of production significantly, and also a good vigilance is possible. So, this is the strategic item, right. Then you have bottleneck products. Bottleneck products have less influence on the financial results of a firm but they are vulnerable to the supply risk. So, the supply, you are not very sure about the supply, right. So, in this case, when the product has is not, when the, when they are not sure about the supply, but they know that it has less impact on the profitability of the company, what should companies do? Okay. In this case, the purchasing strategy is therefore primarily focused on assurance. So, if necessary, even at additional cost. Now, for example, certain items can be bottleneck items, they might have a less impact on your final product, but they are still a necessity, they are required. So, as a result of it, the companies have to focus on a assurance. So, they also sometimes what companies do, they try to develop contracts, 5-year contract, 10-year contract, 3-year contract, 20-year contracts with the company suppliers, so that there is an assurance. Now, whenever we are asking, the supplier should not say no to us, and on this condition they build this contract. Okay. The third thing, the third kind of products as per Kraljic's model is the leverage products. Now, leverage products, as you can understand, again you have seen in the diagram that it has a high impact on the product profitability of the company, but the supply risk is not so high, right. So, that means the suppliers are available, maybe the issues relating to supply is not a big problem. So, what do you do in such a condition? In such a condition, the companies should go for a material management policy. Now, what do you mean by material management policy? Now, here the company should take advantage of its position. Now, so what I am saying is, since the company, let us say, is buying a lot, right. So, it has a large impact on its profit, it says. So, that means the total cost might be very high for the company in a percentage term. So, the company should take advantage of this high volume purchase or high value purchase and exploit or try to bargain with the suppliers. Why? Because the suppliers risk is not there. So, suppliers are easily available, right. So, understanding this situation, they should take advantage of this situation and try to maximize their profits and minimize their cost. Okay. So, this is the strategy the company should use. Okay. The last is the non-critical products. So, this category of products, as we have seen, are those which have a very small value per unit, and here there is no issue of supply. So, that means neither the product has a big impact, makes a huge impact on the profitability of the firm, nor there is a problem of supplier, there is a supply risk, right. So, in such a condition, what should one do? So, one should just simplify. So, one should try to simplify the entire strategy and just take advantage of the situation, because they should not be worried, because there is no point, because suppliers are available, there is no point in holding and wasting your warehouse space, or unnecessary giving time to it and doing so much of unnecessary things. So, it is better that you keep simply the relationship and have a few vendors maybe, and whenever you want you can just buy it from them. So, now let us look at this 4 products and what strategies should be company doing with them, right. So, for example, this is a more holistic way of understanding. So, in terms of the procurement, in terms of the what are the key performance criteria that companies use or should use, right, when the product comes into each of these category, and what kind of sources you should be depending, what is the time horizon that you should be thinking when you are talking about these kind of products, right, and what kind of supplies and what kind of decision has to be is generally done. Okay. So, when you talk about the first, the non-critical items, so for example, so procurement focus could be office supplies, sometimes rods, steel rods, if it is not a major component to you, right. And the key performance criteria is functional efficiency. So, whatever product you are bringing or buying, how is it functioning, what is the efficiency level, right, at which it is functioning. What are the sources? So, you have some established local suppliers. So, you have got a relationship with some local suppliers and you want to get this raw material or services from these people. The time horizon is limited generally up to 12 months maximum, so a year of time. And what kind of supplies are there? Now commodities, some specified materials which are abundantly available, and largely such decisions are taken as a decentralized decision, right. So, every decision making unit is responsible for taking their own decisions, okay. All DMUs are responsible for taking their own decisions in this case. When you talk about leverage items, so as I had said, material management is the strategy. For example, things like electrical motors, heating oil, electronic data processing softwares or hardwares, and then you have key performance criteria which is measured through cost or price and material flow management. What are the sources? You have multiple suppliers, but they are mainly local because the supply is available, is not a very risky item. So, it is available everywhere, and the time horizon is 1 to 2 year, and the types of supply are basically mix of commodities and some specified materials which are again abundantly available, and this is also mainly decentralized. Now, coming to the bottleneck items where you should as a company or as an organization, you should look into a supply assurance, that whenever I need it, that assurance has to be there, because all the time I might not require this item. So, whenever I require, it should be available to me. So, what are these kind of procurement focus is on electronic parts, catalyst materials, outside services, some services which you do not require regularly. What is your performance criteria here? Key performance criteria, now cost management and reliable short term sourcing. Who are the sources? Where do you get these materials from? Now global, maybe globally you can get it from any place in any country, and predominantly new suppliers with new technology, right. So, because you might look at some innovation, some development which can bring in a new change in your product. So, you can look for new suppliers with new technology. Now, what is the time horizon? It can be somewhere in between. So, you can look at how it is available. So, generally it is within a time frame of more than a year or something. So, you can say mid-term, right. And what is the type of supply? Mainly specified materials, production based scarcity. So, whatever the production team demands, so not all the time it would be required, but whenever it requires, at that time it should be available. Again, the strategy decision is decentralized, but sometimes it could be coordinated in a centrally for a particular, let us say, region, for example Asian countries. So, it could be a centralized decision, or let us say within the country, let us say the entire north, right. So, that is that kind of a decision. The last is the strategic items where you have scarce metals, high value components, and the key performance criteria is long term availability, right. Established global partners are your suppliers basically. So, this is the source that you want to always keep a good supplier base. Time horizon can be very long, up to 10 years of time. So, you are creating a very good strategy, a partnership kind of a model with your suppliers. And the types and supply is scarce and high value materials, natural scarcity is where available may be there, and the decision that you take is centralized in nature. So, for such a product, such a raw material, you would not like to leave it to your individual decision making units. Rather, the organization wants to keep a hold or a check on the purchase of these kind of materials, right. So, this is what you understood by the Kraljic's model, right. So, I would like to close this lecture here. We would like to wind up, and we will continue the remaining part of this lecture in the next class, right. So, thank you very much, and let us meet in the next class.